Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we will begin again shortly. A kind reminder to please take your seats. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we're about to begin. Please proceed to your seats. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you had a pleasant lunch and enjoyed the side event. I call this meeting to order. So, as the Vice Chair stated this morning, in order to save time and allow for additional intervention, we will now have Roundtable C and Roundtable D consecutively. I will open the floor for statement related to both roundtables following the end of Roundtable D at Hope 4 p.m. We will continue with Agenda 3, Sustainable Strategy for Responding to and Preventing Violence Against Women and Girls in an Era of Uncertainty. The third panel discussion will be moderated by Mrs. Bandana Rana, member of the Commission on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Afterwards, Agenda Item 3D, Accelerating Gender Equality through Gender Transformative Action that Bridge Dividers and Smoothen Key Transition, will be moderated by Mrs. Christine Arab, Regional Director, UN Women, Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. So now may I ask the moderator and the distinguished panelists for Roundtable C to take their seat in a sofa chair in front of the rostrum. So, Mrs. Rana, you have the floor.
Thank you. We go down.
Hello. Thank you, Honorable Chair, Excellencies, and dear participants. I am pleased to welcome you all to this roundtable on sustainable strategies to respond to and prevent violence against women and girls in an era of uncertainty, a timely and meaningful way to kick off the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. My name is Bandana Rana. I'm from Nepal. I have been an activist for gender equality since the Beijing time. That's when I was born. My advocacy was born, I must say. I'm a member of the CEDAW committee since 2017, and I have been working in this area for a long time, for more than 3 decades. I wish to thank UN Women and ESCAP for the invitation to moderate today's roundtable. We have a group of very experienced panelists today. Her Excellency Nehan Suchetra, Director General of Social Development of the Cambodian Ministry of Women's Affairs, and a representative for women of the ASEAN Commission on the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Women and Children. Her Excellency Stephanie Copus Campbell, Australia's Ambassador for Gender Equality. Dr. Preetha Chatterjee, Head of Global Positioning at Breakthrough, which is a very well-known civil society NGO in the Asia Pacific and globally also. Mr. Pio Smith, And our last panelist is Mr. Pio Smith, the Regional Director of UNFPA Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action marked a pivotal moment in advancing women's rights, yet 3 decades later, we find ourselves facing ongoing and persistent challenges. Progress has been modest and uneven, especially among certain groups of women and girls, with alarming resistance to women's equality persisting in influential spaces, shaping social norms. Violence against women and girls remains pervasive, including in Asia and the Pacific, manifesting in various forms across both private and public domains. While countries have made significant strides in legislation and support mechanisms, these efforts have not sufficed to eradicate violence against women and girls. Today, together with 4 esteemed speakers, we will explore evidence-based strategies, best practices to address the root causes of this violence, highlight promising approaches, and sharing insights gained in the years since Beijing+25, in light also of the lessons learned during the COVID-19 pandemic. During a panel discussion, each panelist will have the opportunity to share their insights in 1 round of questions within 4 minutes, please. So without further ado, I start this very esteemed panel discussion. And my first question goes to Your Excellency, Neha Suchetra. You know, national action, many countries have developed and adopted national action plans on gender-based violence after the Beijing Platform for Action. But during our CEDAW review also, we find a lot of gaps in its implementation, in its robust budgeting, financing, in coordination. So, Your Excellency, what key lessons were learned from implementing and evaluating previous national action plans to end violence against women in Cambodia, and how will these lessons inform the next action plan?
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Good afternoon, ladies, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. I am very pleased to share with you about the Cambodian experience, lesson learned in implementing the National Action Plan to prevent violence against women. Cambodia has made significant progress in promoting gender equality and empowering women and girls, preventing violence against women and girls, which is one among the 12 critical areas of the platform action plan, Beijing platform for action plan concern, has been one among other national priorities for gender equality, and this has been made through policies, action plan, and sectoral reform with strategic measures. And so far, Cambodia has completed 3 national action plans, and now we are on the process of developing the new one for 2024 to 2030, with engage with various stakeholders. And based on the result of the CDHS in 2021-22, so that the National Action Plan have contributed significantly to reduce violence against women and girls, as evident the prevalence rate of the intimate partner violence have declined from 29% in 2014 to 21% in 2021. The National Action Plan is seen as a remarkable national policy guiding for multi-sectoral coordination on ending violence against women and girls, including establishment of the technical working group on gender-based violence at the national level and the GBV working group at the subnational level, which serve as a platform to coordinate and collaborate on the GBV response and prevention. And it is a part, a long-term effort and commitment of the government of Cambodia to end violence against women in our country. So what we have learned from the implementation of this action plan, overall the work around the National Action Plan implementation, coordination and the service delivery was substantial, and there was demonstrated increased collaboration among and between different stakeholders at the national level and subnational level through the technical working group on gender-based violence and the GBV working group at the subnational level. And this mechanism serves as the platform for the stakeholder coordination as well as joint action plan and the monitoring the implementation. And as the result of the final evaluation of the third national action plan found a lot of value work was being undertaken to prevent gender-based violence and as well as the violence against women led by various line ministries across different sectors, but there was limited data collection and monitoring and evaluation to show the effectiveness and the impact. For example, there are many key line ministries and CSO have implemented many initiatives for both prevention and response to GBV. However, there is limited monitoring and reporting on the risk and the effectiveness of the prevention activity with the youth. And how the lesson learned to inform for the next action plan that for the next action plan we should when we develop the next action plan, we should think about the specific key intervention activity, the outcome, objective, and the goal, and also the key indicator for monitoring. And we also have to think about the costing for the implementation of the activity, and also about the role of the agency, the ministry, and CSO who are implement the key intervention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency Nihan Suchitra, for your valuable insights on Cambodia's experiences in implementing its National Action Plan, particularly in relation to setting up different mechanisms for the implementation and the collaborative, coordinated approach between different entities, including your monitoring mechanisms. I hope that Cambodia's policy efforts on this topic can serve as an inspiration for many countries, and I wish you all the best for the implementation of the next plan as well. I would now like to turn over to Ambassador Copus Campbell. Australia is investing in prevention of violence against women and children at home and abroad, and addressing this violence. Sorry, I am confused with my pages. And let me just, and we look up to Australia, as a country in the Asia-Pacific region which has addressed violence against women through several efforts and initiatives. And we would like to hear from you how this could be promoted in other areas and your lessons learned in this area as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So indeed, violence against women is a problem all around the world, and Australia is no exception. In my own country, a significant portion of women and girls experience this violence, and it's something that we are collectively addressing. And in our region, the Asia-Pacific region, we have one of the highest prevalences of violence against women and girls in the world. So it's a serious and significant issue. Addressing it is the right thing to do because no one should experience violence. But it's also absolutely the smart thing to do. And Australia comes at it from both of those angles, the right thing to do to address it and the smart thing to do to address it. Indeed, when we look at the smart reasons, violence affects in a negative way every aspect of our society. Think about our children. When a child is exposed to violence, particularly in the early years, it will affect their development, their mental health, their physical health, how well they do at school, potentially, and can affect, in many cases, their happiness even into adulthood. In Australia, I was reflecting that we had one of our communities that really focused on targeting an end to violence against women through addressing alcohol abuse in that community. And when they did so, when they got on top of this issue, what they saw was the police had more time to do other things than deal with violence in the home and in the community. The hospitals and the emergency room had more time to look at other things because the aspects of violence were overwhelming those emergency rooms. So again, you can see how it undermines aspects of health and education, and indeed the economy. When a person is unable to get to work because, for example, safety on transport, when there's violence in their own home and they're focusing on what's going to happen to them or their children when they get home, unable to focus at work or stay at work, it has a massive economic impact. And there has been a number against that globally, which is $1.5 trillion. That is significant. And of course, when we're looking at international peace and security, there's some wonderfully interesting research that we need to focus on, which says gender-based violence and more generally gender equality is the #1 predictor of conflict, both internally and internationally, more so than a country's level of democracy or religious identity, the #1 predictor of conflict. So for all of these reasons, Australia is very much focused on addressing the unacceptably high levels of violence in our own community, in our region, and globally. It's part of our domestic strategies as well as our international engagement. And if I can just quickly say 4 things in terms of prevention. I mean, there's so much that we're learning and we're still learning about why these numbers are not going the right direction. The first, which I think is really important for us all to reflect, is how we engage in a comprehensive way with what happens with children and violence against children, and how those experiences in childhood don't end when a person's 18. And so how we are integrating how we think about violence against children with how we think about violence against women in a comprehensive way. The second issue that's related to this that we are increasingly thinking about and don't yet have the solutions, but we know we need to think more comprehensively, is about how we engage men and boys as part of the solution, and also in terms of our prevention tools, again, going back to looking at boys and as they develop into men. The third I want to mention is how we continue to support civil society, and we integrate both what civil society is able to do in terms of responding to violence, but also preventing it, having that ambulance at both the top of the cliff as well as the bottom of the cliff. And the last point I want to make is the importance of data and accurate data. It's so incredibly essential that we know what the problem is, that we communicate that, and that in addressing it, we know if we're going in the right direction or the wrong direction. And so that continual focus on, and this is the important word, accurate data in terms of how we are understanding the problem across the world. And if I can just really quickly mention one more thing. As part of that, I think I was asked to just mention it, we also need to look at engaging in new forms or emerging forms of violence, and part of that is also looking at technology-facilitated gender-based violence. It's something that Australia is focused on, again, because no one should have to experience that sort of violence. But secondly, because technology-facilitated gender-based violence is disproportionately targeting women, and it is pushing them out of public spaces at a time we need them in public spaces more than ever.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and sorry for interrupting because we are very constrained with time as well. But I thank you for sharing the inspirational work that Australia has done in preventing technology-facilitated gender-based violence. Very interesting that you said gender-based violence is the #1 predictor of conflict and how the need to address this as well. I also wanted to share and thank you and Australia for hosting the next, as I'm the former chair of the Global Network of Women Shelters, for hosting the next 5th World Conference of Women Shelters in Sydney in September 2025, which is also a platform to address these concerns and share experiences as well. Thank you so much once again. I now move to Dr. Chatterjee from Breakthrough, who has been partnering with women's rights organizations to build a regional civil society-led network focused on ending gender-based violence in Asia. Why is such a group needed, this kind of network, and what are the key messages of this network?
Thank you. Good afternoon, honorable ministers and dignitaries, respected moderator and co-panelists, and CSO representatives from the region. From studying about the role of the UN systems in upholding the tenets of human rights, to speaking here representing Breakthrough and the Asia Network on gender-based violence, it's a matter of great honor and privilege for me. As we all know, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action has facilitated a concerted effort to move from a vastly unequal and gendered world towards a more equal one. However, the progress has been checkered, and gender-based violence, GBV, is still one of the horrific realities. For the last 2 decades and a half, Breakthrough has been working to change gender-based violence and make it unacceptable by transforming the cultural and social norms that permit it. We realize through our work that GBV prevention strategies need to be intersectional, and in order to push the needle effectively, you need a strong narrative around gender transformative systems, a system which addresses and removes structural barriers, recognizes gender as a spectrum, and transforms harmful gender norms. Leveraging on the opportunity provided by the Generation Equality Forum 2021, Breakthrough, along with civil society organizations from Asia, is on their endeavor to create a feminist network rooted in the principles of inclusivity, intersectionality, and shared leadership. As part of the Asia Network, Breakthrough is actively gathering evidence to make a case for a gender transformative education system which challenges gender stereotypes, and we do this by working across 35,000 schools and reaching almost 4 million adolescents in India. The network will also leverage on evidence-based learnings and best practices from across the region for impactful advocacy and co-create a shared learning space. The recommendations of the Asia Network are as follows. Firstly, scale up implementation and financing of evidence-driven prevention strategies by public and private sector institutions and women's rights organizations to drive down prevalence of GBV against adolescents and young people in all their diversity. Second, promote, protect, expand civic space and strengthen the efforts of feminist human rights defenders and women peace builders, including those who are trans, intersex, non-binary, by adequate resourcing and collaboration. We urge governments to bring in policies and legislations for engendering the school education system, as well as allocate resources for long-term commitment to gender transformative education system by design and priority, and not just as an exception. Member states should recognize the growing hazard of tech-facilitated gender-based violence, provide legal access to the survivors, foster digital literacy, and create survivor-informed redressal mechanisms. Feminist principles must guide in days to come development, use of technology, and bridge the gender-digital divide that is vastly existing now. Finally, it is through gender-progressive laws, policies, and actions that we want to change archaic and regressive beliefs and mindsets. It is through feminist collaboration and actions we want to seed new ideas and intersectional narratives that would enable adolescents and young people to reach their full potential and aspirations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Chatterjee, particularly for being on time, very much on time, and for highlighting the vital role of civil society in preventing violence against women, particularly in reaching the most marginalized community of the society, and also for the importance of building cooperative, coherent approaches at the regional level, including on evidence-based prevention. Those of you who are familiar with Breakthrough's work know that we can learn so much more from Breakthrough, and there has been inter-Asia country learnings through Breakthrough as well, so thank you once again. And now my next panelist is Mr. Smith. Since the Beijing+25 review and the COVID-19 pandemic, which highlighted how crises disrupt services for survivors of violence against women and girls, what strategies are needed to strengthen emergency preparedness across this development emergency nexus, and how can a coordinated joint UN approach enhance these efforts? Mr. Smith.
Okay, thank you very much, Bandana, and it's great to be here. Good evening, or good afternoon, everybody. So, you know, emergencies, GBV, strategies, coordination. I think the emergency is that we're still talking about gender-based violence. And so I want to put that on the table, because in 2024, we have 1 in 4 women or girls who are suffering at the hands of intimate partners, physical or sexual violence. That is in of itself an emergency. It's not statistics. It is and has to be a call to action for all of us. But you're right, in these moments of emergencies, like COVID-19, we do see these instances even more exacerbated. And COVID certainly did that. It increased the vulnerabilities of our women and girls to GBV. The lockdown trapped survivors and left them feeling more isolated than ever. But of course, COVID, the pandemic, was no exception. The evidence is clear that every disaster, climate-induced, conflict-induced, it affects women and girls disproportionately. It has the face of a woman or a girl. And that disruption of essential health services leads to a lack of access to life-saving GBV response services, including family planning. And this underscores the real need for us to put in place a resilient approach, one that not only responds to the immediate crisis, but also that is building sustainable systems to support women in their journey to full empowerment. The real importance around coordination can't be understated. You know, in GBV settings, it's quite simply life-saving. But yet, when emergencies strike, GBV response coordination is not always prioritized the way that it should be. UNFPA is the global lead on GBV in emergencies, and we've made significant investments in that coordination piece, strengthening it and the capacities, but it can't be a one-off effort. And so we need that sustained, true collaboration across all sectors so that we can ensure a coordinated GBV response becomes part of the integrated response that the region is putting in place for how we prepare and respond to crises. But we also need to put in place resilient GBV response systems that span both the humanitarian and development context, the so-called nexus. That requires investing in multi-sectoral GBV response mechanism where the burden of access of services does not fall onto the survivor. Instead, the system should be prepared to support her and her needs. And so that's, regardless of the context, what we should focus on. Of course, we all know that GBV is preventable, and there's more evidence than ever that points to, effective prevention work actually making inroads. To address GBV at its roots, we need sustained investments in these proven evidence-based strategies, such as CSE, but also programs that are transforming toxic masculinity and promoting gender equality. Men need to step up and men need to speak up on this issue. We also need to improve the access to multi-sectoral GBV response services and make sure that the policies are inclusive and that they meet the needs of the most vulnerable women and girls, especially those at highest risk, particularly people living with disabilities or from our LGBTQ community. In terms of the preparedness efforts, local women's organizations are a key ingredient. All humanitarian development nexus interventions, they need to be guided by local women leaders because they are the ones who actually have that lived experience. They understand the unique needs of women and communities, and so therefore they should be central in terms of that design and implementing the programs that are not only effective but also contextually and culturally appropriate. And just to wrap, to say that data is obviously really important for making sure that we're able to, break the silence, strengthen the collective response. But we also have to, like Stephanie mentioned, we have to be alert to the emerging aspects, such around the digital piece and the technology facilitated. Women and girls need to be able to navigate online without that fear of abuse whenever we're trying to access, increase the access to digital tools. So there's a lot that still has to be done. I think in the UN we have a lot of powerful examples around prevention strategies and frameworks, also too in terms of the response piece. But ultimately this is about partnership, and it's also, if I can just 10 seconds, Bandana, just to say, now more than ever, and again, Stephanie has touched on this, now more than ever, the pushback on rights is increasing in a very visceral manner, and that's why partnerships across all sectors is going to be key.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for your valuable insights, particularly in highlighting the need for coordinated approach within the UN systems for effectively responding to violence against women. And I want to add here that linkages also need to be strengthened with the CEDAW mechanism by UN agencies, by state parties, by civil society to strengthen accountability to respond to violence against women. And with that, we have come to the close of this panel discussion. I'm sorry about the short time that we had, and I had to rush you through this. But thank you to all our esteemed panelists for your valuable insights and contributions. It is through dialogues like these that we can share and learn together on what works to end violence against women and girls. I trust the Roundtable has provided valuable perspectives to advance our shared understanding of prevention of violence against women and girls. Continued investment in evidence-based initiatives is essential to prevent and end violence against women and girls through coordinated and multi-sectoral strategies within the context of the humanitarian development peace nexus, while remaining vigilant against rising forms of violence, including technology-facilitated gender-based violence. I would like to acknowledge the leadership of UN Women and ESCAP in convening today's roundtable and creating space for this strategic discussion. Excellencies, distinguished participants, I will now hand over the floor to Ms. Christian Arab, Regional Director of UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, who will facilitate and moderate the next roundtable. Thank you once again for your participation. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Yes? Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to ask straight away for the esteemed panelists to join me. We have Honorable Advisor Sharmeen Murshid from Bangladesh, the Chair of the National Council for Women of the Philippines, Urmi Valiveda. We have Dio Tobing. It's a pleasure to meet you. And I'm sorry, Olga, I saw you and then I lost you. There you are. Please join us. Okay. And we just, one moment. Okay. You're in the wrong seat. You're, Just one moment and we will start. All right, very good. Thank you, everyone, and I thank you for your patience. We are trying to utilize our time as best as possible, and I want to thank the previous panel who covered a depth of knowledge in a very short time and very, very well. This panel is a bit unusual in that we are looking at the mega trends that bring so many of stark challenges. I hesitate to call them new. I think our understanding of them is new. And that is specifically the impact that climate is having on women and the advancement of the Beijing Platform for Actions, the impact that, and within that environmental degradation, the impact that digital transformation is having, the pros, the cons, and care. And we all know that it has been COVID that brought the care economy's weaknesses and its value into stark picture for us all. For those of us who have been feminists for many years, that is not a surprise, the degree to which the care economy impacts women's advancement. What we have with us today are some very experienced panelists who understand that, of course, these mega trends, as we call them, are interlinked. And they impact women differently based on where they live, their age, their ethnicity, their orientation, their abilities, and especially in many cases their age. I don't want to take too much time because we don't have much time, and I really appreciate the flexibility of all of our partners here. I'm going to start straight away and first put my glasses on. We have with us Chair Urmi Valdevila, who is the head of the National Council for Women in the Philippines, Philippine Commission on Women. Chair Urmi has been a long-standing partner and colleague of UN Women for many, many years. And the depth of the Philippines experience is something that we all need to learn from because of the way in which they have been actively integrating these three megatrends. With your experience, Chair Urmi, what do you see as the most significant issues that have emerged since the Beijing Declaration's adoption that require accelerated action, and why? Given the current social and economic transitions, what actions would you recommend to advance and go beyond? With specifically regarding gender-smart financing, of which the Philippines is such a leader, and investments in care. And you have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Blessings of good life to everyone. On the first question, I chose unpaid care and domestic work, and the second question is related to that. The issue of unpaid care and domestic work is not post-Beijing. It has been an issue since time immemorial, and thanks to SDG Target 5.4, recognizing and valuing unpaid care and domestic work, many countries are addressing it now including the ASEAN. It is a significant issue because it is a pillar of female subordination and a powerful mechanism of intergenerational transmission of gender inequality in societies. Overall, men spend more time in paid market work while women spend more time on unpaid domestic and care work, which explains why women have generally inferior economic status. The exact data varies across countries, but in the Philippines, around 50% of the female population are involved in unpaid care and domestic work compared to only 20% for men. The amount of time women devote to unpaid care and domestic work is approximately twice as much as those of men. The issue of unpaid care and domestic work requires accelerated action because it contributes to the nullification of opportunities for the enjoyment of women's rights. ESCAP pointed out that care and domestic work have been serving as the salient backbone of the economy, and women and girls spend 11 hours a day on reproducing the labor force, ensuring the well-being of the family, and enabling the thriving of human capital. The demands of unpaid care and housework have kept women from taking options for skill improvement, promotion, travel, and other opportunities. When unpaid, care and domestic work is undervalued, invisible, unrecognized, and unaccounted for. And when compensated, the pay is low, social protections are either inferior or absent, work hours are long and backbreaking, and the work is regarded as undignified and demeaning. However way I see it, it is discrimination, and discrimination is injustice. All state parties to CEDAW are duty-bound to eliminate all forms of discrimination against women, and this is a reminder to what we need to do. The building of care economies among countries could be one of the most transformative results of the SDG. It is forecasted that investing in care economy could create 300 million jobs by 2035. But more than this, fair redistribution and increased share of government, private corporations, and communities in care and unpaid work would liberate women from the poverty of time and energy, which is good for humanity. Addressing the second question on smart financing for care economy, I already shared in my statement yesterday that legislating the allocation of a percentage of official development assistance and annual government budget for gender programs is among the smartest gender financing approaches my country ever tried. At this moment, we have not even finished drafting our care economy framework, but already 23 local government units are implementing their respective care economy ordinance because they can allocate and use their own budgets for such purpose. It is an empowering budget because it is institutionalized, predictable, accessible, and flexible. There are four other budgets that could be tapped for the care economy. First, there are packages of benefits for solo parents, for PWDs, senior citizens, and marginalized families. Within those budgets, we can get a rider for care work benefits of the people targeted by those laws. For example, the care bill that is now filed in the Senate of the Philippines, granting benefits and privileges to unpaid care workers and their families include 20% discounts from expenses on transportations, restaurants, recreation, and medical treatment, 3 days of work leave, flexible work schedule, educational benefits, and others. Second, we also have around 10 laws that are linked to care, but some of them have no budgetary provisions. Now, when we lobby for our care legislation, we will try to fight for a provision specifically identifying the sources of budgets for the implementation of laws that support the care economy. Third, the Global Alliance on Care, with 240 members, including the Philippines, supports care economy efforts by mobilizing support from philanthropists, bankers, funders, and linking them with countries working on their care economies. Lastly, we will explore financing opportunities from the corporate social responsibility and corporate governance policies of private companies and work with trade and labor unions to include care economy benefits in their collective bargaining priorities.
Thank
Friends.
you. Your Excellency, thank you. At time, so if you want to wrap.
Okay. Friends, building our care economy will enable us to give back to women at least half of the 11 hours that unpaid care and housework have taken from them. Let this be the end of women's time poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, so much, and for sharing the Philippine Commission on Women's experience. It is excellent to hear that not only are you working at the national level, but working to localize the care responsibilities. That's and linking that to financing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I would now like to introduce you to Mr. Dio Tobing. He's the head of the digital policy at World Benchmarking Alliance. Mr. Tobing leads the World Benchmarking Alliance's public policy strategy on digital transformation and inclusion, and you use evidence-based approaches, which is music to our ears, to assess the social impact of digitalization. Mr. Tobing, what are the primary barriers to achieving full digital inclusion, and to what extent is progress being made? Additionally, what policy actions, investments, or collaborations do you feel are the most pressing to actually see the change we want in terms of women's empowerment?
Thank you very much for the questions, Ms. Kristen Arab, and thank you for having us today, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dio Tobing, and I represent the World Benchmarking Alliance, and our organization assesses the extent to which the most influential companies, corporate actors globally, contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. Among others, we have 2,000 companies that we assessed are digital tech companies, in which they represent 10% of the total 2,000, which are 200 companies. And these tech companies are at the forefront of digitalizations, digital transformations, as well as providing digital inclusion that also encompasses empowerment for women and girls. And as we witness the globally transformed world that we are living right now, that is accelerated by transformation in the digital sphere, we acknowledge that there is an improvement of quality and productivity through offline to online, online to offline platforms such as ride-hailing, such as social media and financial technology that bridges a lot of women and access to this technology. And alongside of this structure that has been built by the digital technology companies, governments are investing in accessible and inclusive digital public infrastructure. Nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, tech companies hold a responsibility to promote universal connectivity and digital inclusion, again, particularly to topics that we discussed today, women and girls. And this commitment needs to be embedded at the core of their corporate principles. And through our benchmarking exercise, however, as we assess 200 companies, name every brand that we can, the devices that we use, the app that we rely on a daily basis, the results reveal that only 33.5% of the companies assessed have disclosed a commitment to gender equality and women empowerment. And this is quite alarming because this is only 1 out of 3 companies that we assess. And dive deeping into a specific methodology that assessing on the extent to which they consider due diligence to women and girls, our evidence found out of 200 companies, only 5 of them, or 2.5%, have indicated that they consult women or women groups as a part of their risk identification and assessment process. And this is also very important to note because for us, when it comes to women empowerment, girls empowerment in the digital era, it has to come from the heart of the tech companies themselves because they are the main developers and providers that accelerates digital transformations globally. Our data also found that no companies have public disclosed policies with time-bound targets on gender equality, women empowerment within their supply chains. This is the second tier of a part of their business process. There is a saying in the current world that the technology or the tech is a male-dominated industry. And from our benchmarking exercises, this actually resonates strongly, and our evidence provide that it is a reality that this sector provide poor performance and gender-related actions and empowerment of women and girls. To bridge the digital divide for women and girls, corporate innovators need to make meaningful changes as a critical starting point. As to the second questions, what policies do we need? What regulations should be in place? As digitalization continues to be driven and accelerated by the private innovators and corporations, it is crucial to create an enabling environment that harnesses technology for the public good. Historically, regulations in the tech sector has always been reactive in response to the tech industry. We need policies that are fundamentally now proactive. And how do we do this? It is now impractical to regulate technology on content on technology basis. It is important for us to regulate the principles basis, where we put women empowerment, gender equality as a part of the core business process. In the recent adoptions of the Global Digital Compact, back in the Summit of the Future in September, Article 32B calls on digital technology companies and developers to co-develop industry accountability frameworks. And the World Benchmarking Alliance rely on this particular line of the GDC to empower, to create standards that empowers digital inclusions universally, including on gender equality standards. Our data reveals that only 32 companies, fewer than 1 out of 3, have achieved gender balance, which is between 40 to 60% at the highest governance level. And the senior executive level, this drops to only 24 companies, in which it's fewer, 1 of the 4 companies globally, with the representations at senior management level. Principles, policy actions, and representation could help bring more women into tech leadership, setting an example for gender equality, resilience, and accountability in digital transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tobing. And that's a sobering statistic. 1 out of 3 companies are reaching this. And unfortunately, we don't have the data to compare where we were when Beijing was signed, but it's still not fast enough, I would say. I would like to now introduce Ms. Olga Janeva, Director of the Rural Women's Association, ALGA, and one of the co-chairs of the Regional CSO Engagement Mechanism. Her work is focused on empowering rural women through programs aimed at poverty eradication, leadership development, and access to innovative technologies. Ms. Javena, with your experience in forging strategic partnerships to drive meaningful change, could you share a successful initiative empowering rural women in the context of either social, economic, or environmental transitions? And what promising innovations do you see now that can really accelerate the situation for rural women? Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you, Christine. So good afternoon, distinguished member states, civil society colleagues, and other stakeholders. Really, for me, it's a great opportunity today to speak and to share with you. And I would like to share on an initiative that I am particularly proud of from our work at the Rural Women's Association, ALGA, based in Kyrgyzstan, Central Asia. It aimed to empower rural women by tackling key social and economic challenges while addressing the environmental issues they face in their daily life. This comprehensive, integrated program based on the 5 main capitals and aimed on sustainable livelihoods attaining. The main focus is on building women's leaderships and self-confidence, on providing rural women with access to microloans, practical business training, and connecting them with local markets. At the same time, we helped women farmers learn and adopt climate-resilient agricultural methods, which were crucial as many faced increasing risks from climate change. This dual focus on economic empowerment and environmental sustainability made a real difference, not only strengthening their livelihoods, but also building community resilience. Several factors made this program successful. First, we involved women at early stage, making sure their voices guided the program. This sense of ownership and active participation made a big impact. Second, we built strong partnerships with local communities, governmental bodies, international organizations, and women's networks in movement in sub-region and in the Asia-Pacific region. So this allowed us to share resources and ideas to reach our goals more effectively. And lastly, we prioritized sustainability, making sure women gained skills they could carry forward and pass on to others.
The key takeaway for similar efforts is simple. Include the voices and needs of those you are working with. Build strong partnerships and ensure the changes you make can last beyond just some project. And in rural areas where structural and systemic challenges are deeply rooted, complex technological innovations offer incredible promise for advancing gender equality. One of the most promising approaches is the use of digital tools and platforms to expand women's access to information, resources, and markets. Mobile banking and financial services, for instance, have proven transformative for women who previously lacked access to traditional banking systems. These technologies enable women to save, invest, and grow their businesses independently. Additionally, digital education platforms and online training programs can provide rural women and girls with valuable skills and knowledge tailored to their needs. From agricultural techniques to business management and health education, these resources bridge knowledge gaps and empower women to make informed decisions. Another critical innovation is leveraging data-driven decision-making. By using gender-disaggregated data, we can better identify the specific needs of rural women and design targeted intervention that address those needs more effectively. This ensures resources are allocated where they are most needed, closing gaps in areas like healthcare, education, and economic opportunity. To integrate, to localize these innovations and create a more equitable and just environment, collaboration is key. Governments, civil society organizations, private sector, and the local communities must work together to ensure technologies are accessible, affordable, and designed with inputs from rural women themselves. Building digital literacy programs, providing infrastructure support, and promoting inclusive policies can ensure that no woman or girl is left behind in this rapidly changing landscape.
Thank you, Olga. We're now at time, but thank you so much. It's very interesting and excellent that there is such targeted intervention for the challenges that rural women face. Thank you for sharing the case example. Very appreciated. And I know there's more to say, and I appreciate this. We also are just trying to manage the time to ensure that the floor has as much time for interventions, questions, and reflections as well. I want to turn to our discussant right now, Mr. John Samuel, the Asia Pacific Regional Director for Oxfam International. He brings over 30 years of global expertise in enhancing human rights, democratic governance, and sustainable development. Mr. Samuel, from your perspective, where should countries in our region focus their investment to advance women's empowerment and resilience in the face of the changing socioeconomic situation, and also the changing political context that we're grappling with? And what do you see as the biggest opportunities not to be missed, including to some extent in the care economy?
Thank you very much, moderator, distinguished panelists, distinguished delegates, friends, and colleagues. As we sit now, thinking about the Beijing+, I was in Beijing. I was thinking about how the world has moved after that. We are in the midst of war. We are in the midst of lots of economic troubles, and women are increasingly marginalized everywhere. And that's important to recognize. Number two, inequality and injustice are the root cause of poverty and marginalization everywhere, and the most marginalized happen to be women. And in that context, how do you really build what I call a decolonial feminist approach to women's empowerment and emancipation? It's very important to stress a feminist approach rather than just say things in the usual way. Because unless women's lives are controlled by women, there won't be any transition. Whether it is care economy, or climate change, or digital divide, or women's political participation, unless and until women has the agency to take decision and to organize, to assert the policy and political space, there will not be any change happen. Oxfam work with partners in 90 countries with the support of 3 million people across the world. What we have learned in the course of working on Beijing+ platform of action, number one, it is important to recognize care economy and domestic work. And I work with ASEAN for many years, including countries in ASEAN, has resulted in a very positive and a great opportunity. Opportunity number one is ASEAN Declaration or Care Economy. And I think ASEAN did a great thing in the last ASEAN meeting in Laos. It's very, very important. The next opportunity is now, how do you translate ASEAN Declaration into policy framework? That's the second very important thing. It's one thing to have declaration, it's another thing to have clear policy framework and policy action and policy practice. Number three, to do policy practice, there's a need for money, financing. And all the partners who are sitting here, UN Women need more money, right? Civil society actors need more money. And this is very important, and financing is a very important thing. If you really wanted to address SDG number 5, gender inequality, there has to be more money where your mouth is. Without resources, things would not move. Government will have to put more gender budgeting, and we have been talking about gender budgeting. And, the governments will have to fund, OECD countries will have to, dedicate more funds for women's empowerment. So that's the sort of third thing. Fourth is multi-stakeholder partnership. It's so important to work with business and inclusive business, where in the value chain, women have equal space, equal wage, and gender justice is being done. Civil society has a huge role to play because we are increasingly living in a world where civic space is constrained everywhere. The civic freedom, civil and political freedom are constrained everywhere. Women's rights to mobilization are constrained everywhere. So it's very important to have strengthening civil society. And I think UN organizations also need to be empowered. As somebody who worked in the United Nations, I know that UN also constrained for lots of funds. So I would like to sum up saying that it's only by, bringing new innovations, new resources, and new partnerships, a new policy paradigm, we will be able to make a difference. And we hope by 2030, at least, the SDG 5 goals and indicators will be met. With that kind of optimism, I would like to thank the organizers once again.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Samuel, and an excellent point on the ASEAN Care Framework. This is such an important gain, and fully agree on the financing. It's crucial. We are now very pleased to be joined by our Honorable Advisor, Ms. Sharmeen Murshid, who is the advisor on the Ministry of Women and Children's Affairs and Social Welfare in Bangladesh. Ms. Murshid is a pioneering sociologist and institution builder, recognized for her contributions to participatory governance, sustainable community development, and social entrepreneurship in Bangladesh. Honorable Advisor, given Bangladesh's frontline position in the climate crisis, what are the main barriers to women's empowerment and climate action and environmental management? And what, in your experience, have been the strategies effective in overcoming these? You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
say a few words rather in the context of climate change. In Bangladesh, the coastal belt is one of the most profoundly affected regions, by which I mean climate change affects it very adversely and directly. And that's 1/3 of Bangladesh, 1/3 of its population, 1/3 of its regional space. One of the things that I've noticed is that we talk about lost damages, we talk about finance. Yes, all that is true. There's a dearth of finance to address the huge losses we incur. But one of the things I think very relevant to our discussion in terms of gender is the feminization of the family and due to climate change. And why do I say that? Because in our coastal area, when storms and the frequency of storms and floods occur, there are regions that are completely disrupted. And when that disruption occurs, the whole social order is disrupted. And when the social order is disrupted, women are the first to be affected. Men migrate out of those areas seeking jobs, and they don't return. And the family is the woman and the child. And in my view, more and more, the definition of family is changing. The definition of family is becoming more and more the mother and the child. Now, this is a phenomenon we see, but we don't talk about it. The burden on the woman due to climate change is monumental. She not only loses her environment and her workspace and her, her socioeconomic ecosystem is lost. And in that, the traditional definition of what is a family is disrupted. Here are some of the effects that I see that happens. One, the family is completely a feminine family, as I have said. It's not just feminization of poverty, as we often talk about, it is feminization of the concept of family. Secondly, we notice that when the socioeconomic order is completely broken down, and mind you, these floods are annual events, and you build and it breaks, and you build and it breaks, and you build again, and the next year it breaks again. So what have you got? You've got an extremely unstable condition. Child marriage soars because parents can't give that security. Mothers can't give that security to the children. Children drop in education. And this is an area in Bangladesh. While Bangladesh improves in terms of the overall growth, both in finance, both in GDP, economic growth, and in fact in gender parity. So it performs amongst the best in South Asia. Yet, here's a region that completely goes the reverse way. So poverty increases at a much higher rate in areas where climate change is affected, and women's condition is acutely affected. Where does Beijing+ fit in all that? And have we been able to address that? 30 years of the platform, and I think we've missed out in being able to identify critically important specific areas that need our attention. One, there's a lack of data, as you all know, and we have been trying to improve that through our time survey. Now, that allows us, data means not leaving anyone behind. Good, responsible data means you have strategies that work, and you also identify the issues and the problems. In my view, climate change has absolutely jeopardized the lives of our women and our children. Education, children are drastically affected. You can't send little girls across the river or across the floods to go to school. So the whole scenario of what we know to be a normal life, socioeconomic system, it does not exist, or it fails. So rebuilding that, here is our, my point in terms of loss and damage. This is nearly a yearly phenomena, annual phenomena. So, I would like to say that the platform, Beijing platform, the coming years, the next year in the convention, there are things that we need to think of. We need to seek out alternative pathways. For example, responsible fathers. Why is there such a high desertion? We have not worked on the men.
Honorable Advisor. Sorry, the time is very tight. I'm so
Right.
sorry if you just
So
want to close.
Yes, let me just conclude by saying that the coming convention should actually look at what we have not done, not at what we have already done, so that we achieve a greater height in our achievement.
Thank you all so much. I know the time was tight, and you managed to distill an enormous amount of expertise and experience, and it's really appreciated. Your Excellencies and colleagues very much appreciate the sharing, and we look forward to hearing the experiences further from the floor. And I now hand over to our Honourable Minister, the Chair, and to ESCAP, and I want to give hats off to ESCAP for convening this panel on megatrends. It is crucial, so thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rana and Mrs. Arab, and all the panelists from both roundtables C and D for this interesting and empowering discussion. Thank you so much. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I will now open the floor for country statement. I would like to urge all speakers to strictly adhere to the time limit of 3 minutes. To ensure that we can hear from all those participating, the Secretariat has received speaking requests, and we will also call on government in the room who raise their flag. So I will first open the floor to statements from members, associate members, and observers countries. I will then invite statements from intergovernmental organizations, United Nations entities, and civil society representatives, and other stakeholders. So now I open the floor for statement. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Australia to please take the floor, followed by Kiribati. So please, Kiribati, be prepared for Australia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Violence against women is a national crisis in Australia. In the first half of this year, 1 woman was killed every 4 days by her current or former partner. We know we need to change the culture, the attitudes, and the response to violence, including in the legal system. We're getting better at making sure we've got services and supports for women and children and ensuring they're tailored to their unique needs. But we are not there yet. We need to reflect and be honest about what's not working so we can develop real change. We need a much stronger focus on preventing violence, not just responding to it. Because as we've heard today, we aren't doing enough to prevent violence against women and girls in this era of uncertainty. Australia is serious about fixing this, but it won't happen overnight. We have set an ambitious target to end violence against women and children in 1 generation, and we've made this a national priority. We are one of 3 countries in the world to appoint a domestic, family and sexual violence commissioner. The commissioner, alongside our government, is listening to those with lived experience of violence and embedding their voices at a national level. Women shouldn't have to choose between their safety and their job. To address this, Australia legislated its first paid family and domestic violence leave, which gives all employees an entitlement to 10 days of paid domestic and family violence leave each year. This includes part-time and casual employees. We're turning our efforts now to perpetrators, particularly high-risk and serial perpetrators, to prevent homicide and keep women safe. And we're working with men and boys to dismantle harmful stereotypes and gender norms that hold them behind. To break the cycle of violence, we're investing in child-centric and trauma-informed supports for children and young people, recognising children and young people as victim survivors in their own right. We're also committed to working in genuine partnership with our First Nations communities and maintaining a central focus those women and children who are missing and murdered. We are listening to leading experts and people with lived experience to guide and strengthen our evidence-based approaches to preventing violence. We have a long and hard road ahead of us. Australia is not there yet, but we're serious about fixing it through new, innovative and sustainable solutions. We look forward to continuing to learn from each of you as we tackle this significant problem in our communities. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished delegate of Australia. Now, may I invite the distinguished delegate of Kiribati. So sorry for making a mistake on the name of your country. So Kiribati, you have the floor, and followed by Solomon Island. Thank you.
Honorable Chair, ladies and gentlemen, Kamnepeni Maori, Kiribati recognizes the critical need for sustainable strategies to address violence against women and girls. While we have made notable strides in responding to this issue, significant gaps and emerging challenges still require our attention and particularly in prevention efforts. Our efforts have led to several key achievements. Through SafeNet, a multi-sectoral GBV response mechanism that includes the police, health service, crisis center, social welfare, and the legal services, we have established standard operating procedures and training manuals for each sector. This has improved access to medical, legal, and psychosocial support for survivors. The existing referral pathway for survivors and the gender-based violence database have further strengthened our efforts. Training and capacity building initiatives for service providers have also enhanced our ability to respond effectively to gender-based violence cases. The Kiribati Men's Behavioral Change Program has engaged men and boys in challenging harmful gender norms, contributing to a shift in attitudes and behavior. However, challenges persist. The absence of a comprehensive prevention program, the underreporting of violence due to fear of stigma, limited resources, particularly in remote areas, and data gaps remain a barrier to targeted interventions and effective policy planning. We must also tackle megatrends. Climate change and disasters exacerbate vulnerabilities, particularly for women in rural and coastal areas, increasing their exposure to violence during emergencies. The rise of technology-facilitated GBV adds another layer of complexity, often resulting in increased cases of violence and exploitation. Furthermore, gender-responsive budgeting is crucial to ensure sufficient resources are allocated to implement effective policies and programs that prioritize gender equality and the prevention of violence against women and girls. As we navigate these uncertain times, it is imperative to strengthen our strategies to ensure sustainable long-term progress. This underscores our unwavering need to establish a robust national prevention framework to combat violence against women and girls, strengthen services, and address emerging issues. By building resilience and ensuring adequate resources, we can make meaningful progress. We warmly welcome continued partnerships with development partners and our Asia-Pacific brothers and sisters as we collectively strive towards a world where women and girls live free from violence and realize their full potential. I thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, distinguished delegates of Kiribati. Now, the next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate of Solomon Island, whom I now invite to take the floor, followed by Sri Lanka. Please, Sri Lanka, be prepared.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Solomon Island welcomes this very important roundtable. The COVID-19 pandemic, climate-induced displacement, climate-related conflicts, and economic challenges have exacerbated existing vulnerabilities, including experiences of violence in all its forms, particularly by women and girls from marginalized groups, including those with disabilities, those living in rural and remote areas, and the elderly, who face additional barriers to accessing justice and support. Sustainable strategies to addressing violence against women and girls in Solomon Islands includes establishing a response and referral system that is multi-sectoral and at all levels, including the engagement of communities. Working with local leaders, including women, has been essential to challenging patriarchal structures that perpetuate violence. These community-driven solutions foster local ownership and long-term change. The mandate to address violence against women and girls must be explicitly established within gender and sectoral policies and legislations, supported by clear coordination, reporting, and accountability tools and mechanisms. Government-led oversight of the gender-based violence response and referral systems is critical for sustainability of such systems. Solomon Islands Family Protection Act is a vital tool in our legal response, but we recognize that enforcement continues to remain a challenge. Expanding our gender-based violence services into our rural and remote areas poses challenges including climate change and natural disasters. Therefore, critical that our support systems are resilient, flexible, and context-specific. Integrating an economic empowerment aspect to addressing violence against women and girls ensures a sustainable and long-term prevention and recovery strategy for survivors. Given the transnational nature of the issue and the emerging forms of gender-based violence, the Solomon Islands advocate for increased cooperation and coordinated efforts with neighboring countries and regional organizations, including the Pacific Island Forum and the Pacific Community, in combating violence against women and girls, including its prevention, and to prioritize women's voices in all decision-making processes. As we look towards the future, we must ensure that all our efforts for combating violence against women and girls are resilient, adaptive, and sustainable in the face of global uncertainty. The Solomon Islands remain steadfast in its commitment to eliminating all forms of violence and enhancing women's rights and dignity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished delegate of Solomon Island, for your statement. The next speaker on my list is Sri Lanka, whom I now invite to take the floor, followed by Turkmenistan.
Thank you very much for the opportunity given to speak on the strategies and approaches that Sri Lankan government has implemented to address and prevent violence against women and girls. Sri Lanka's recovery from economic crisis in 2022 provided opportunities to accelerate gender equality and the empowerment of women, as witnessed by the significant achievements made in the area of policy formulation, legal enactments, and amendments. A key achievement was the Cabinet approval of the National Policy on Gender Equality and Women Empowerment. This policy includes 8 thematic areas addressing key gender inequalities in Sri Lanka, including the prevention of sexual and gender-based violence. It envisions a just society where women, men, and gender minorities are treated equally and their rights and freedoms are upheld. The policy's overarching focus is on non-discrimination and ensuring substantive equality, reflecting the principles of CEDAW and the objectives of the Beijing Platform for Action. The Women Empowerment Act, enacted in July 2024, calls for the establishment of the National Commission on Women, the appointment of the Women Ombudsperson to protect women's rights, and setting up of a National Fund for Women, and endorsing the implementation of the National Gender Equality and Women Empowerment Policy. Another significant initiative is the formulation of the second National Action Plan on addressing SGBV for 2024 to 2028. The second National Action Plan was approved by the Cabinet, making an important step in using evidence and lessons learned from the first implementation of the first National Action Plan to shape policy and action on SGBV. Expanding the toll-free women's helpline to operate 24 hours all 7 days was a key advancement during the COVID pandemic, driven by a rise of reported SGBV cases. Support for SGBV survivors has also increased, with temporary shelters established nationwide, some operating under public-private partnership model with support from civil society organizations. Among these shelters, 2 are specifically designated for women with disabilities. Due to the tech-based SGBV has risen, the need for stronger legal protection led to the enactment of the Online Safety Act of 2024, which addresses digital harassment, including the unauthorized sharing of private photos and videos. Other key strategies pursued by the government of Sri Lanka include promote positive gender equitable attitudes, beliefs, values, and norms, especially among men and boys. These efforts showcase sustainable progress in Sri Lanka's effort to respond to SGBV, reflecting a holistic approach that includes legal reforms, support services, awareness raising, and victim-centered care. Sri Lanka will continue to strengthen institutional mechanisms, foster multi-stakeholder collaboration, and invest in preventive measures to ensure the safety, dignity, and empowerment of all women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, distinguished delegate of Sri Lanka, for trying to keep time. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate from Turkmenistan, whom I now invite to take the floor, followed by Cambodia. Cambodia, be prepared.
Спасибо за предоставленное слово. Уважаемые участники конференции, в Туркменистане на программной основе осуществляется гендерно-ориентированная политика, принимаются гармонизированные с международными нормами национальные законы, в сотрудничестве с международными структурами реализуются тематические программы и планы по обеспечению гендерного равенства, связанные с достижением целей устойчивого развития на период до 2030 года. Туркменистан последовательно реализует положения международных документов, включая цели и задачи Пекинской декларации платформы действий, Конвенции СИДО и обеспечивая женщинам осуществление и пользование правами человека и на основе гендерного равенства с мужчинами. Вопросы гендерного развития находят свое отражение во всех национальных программах социально-экономического развития страны, важными направлениями которых является дальнейшая интеграция женщин в социально-экономическое и культурное развитие Туркменистана. Национальные программы также взаимосвязаны с целями устойчивого развития, включая цель 5 – обеспечение гендерного равенства и расширение прав и возможностей всех женщин и девочек. В настоящее время у нас в стране осуществляется комплекс мер в рамках национального плана действий по гендерному равенству в Туркменистане на 2021-2025 годы, направленные на дальнейшее развитие механизмов внедрения гендерного подхода в процесс разработки и реализации государственной политики в различных сферах жизнедеятельности общества. План включает 7 стратегических направлений, созвучных целям и задачам Пекинской декларации и платформы действий. И среди этих направлений есть такое направление, как противодействие гендерному насилию в отношении женщин и девочек. В Туркменистане проведено обследование при содействии агентства ООН о распространенности насилия в отношении женщин по здоровью и положению женщины в семье. Оно проведено во всех регионах и в городе Ашхабаде, в столице, и представляет собой первый национальный опыт сбора данных и анализа проблемы домашнего насилия в отношении женщин. Обследование сыграло важную роль в оценке ситуации с гендерным насилием в стране и внесло дополнительный вклад в разработку национальной политики и мер по обеспечению гендерного равенства. По результатам обследования разработана дорожная карта, которая включает ряд мероприятий, направленных на противодействие гендерного насилия. Уважаемые коллеги, позвольте выразить уверенность, что конструктивное обсуждение реализации задач и положений Пекинской декларации и платформы действий, обмен мнениями, информацией и успешным опытом внесут свой позитивный вклад в вопросы обеспечения и поощрения прав женщин и девочек. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished delegate of Turkmenistan. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegates of Cambodia, whom I now invite to take the floor, followed by Mongolia.
Honorable chairs, ladies and gentlemen, realizing the remain challenge and learning from the good example and best practice, Cambodia will further strengthen the inter-ministerial collaboration and partnership with UN agency, development partner, the private sector, civil society, the media, and importantly, women organizations to asserting gender equality and women empowerment. Appreciate all the effort. We would not move this far and able to celebrate this together without these strong and strategic collaborations. Gender transformative approach will further enhance our commitment in the government pentagonal strategy and the 5-year strategic plan on gender equality and women empowerment, aligning with Beijing Platform for Actions. Some important strategies within our gender transformative approach framework include: 1. Strengthening the policy-informed gender responsive data and statistics. 2. Institutionalize gender responsive budgeting across the government, ministry, and public financial management reform. 3. Enhancing the agency and leadership diverse women and girls at all levels, including addressing care and domestic work. And 4. Transforming gender mindset and norm, including the involvement of men, boys, and communities. Together, we can build a future where gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls are recognized, protected, and recognized. Thank you, Honorable Chairs.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished delegate of Cambodia. May I now invite the distinguished delegate of Mongolia. You have the floor to take the floor, followed by Uzbekistan.
Dear Chair, Mongolia recognizes that achieving gender equality necessitates inclusive and diverse representation at all levels of decision-making. Currently, women comprise 25.4% of the members of parliament and hold critical position in government and private sector. While this is a step forward, it also highlights the need to further amplify women's voices and public policy making and governance. To address these gaps, the government of Mongolia has increased leadership opportunities, introduced initiatives to train and mentor women leaders at local and national levels, strengthened legal protections, enhanced legal provisions, and eliminate discrimination and violence against women and public life, supported civil society's engagement, partnered with civil society organizations to promote grassroots leadership and empower women in underserved communities. Gender-responsive governance is integral to building an equitable society. Mongolia has taken concrete steps to institutionalize gender-responsive policies across all sectors. Regarding budgeting and policy reform, introduced gender-responsive budgeting to address the differential needs for men and women in economic planning. Mongolia's revised election law in 2023 has introduced a gender quota system, ensuring at least 30% of female representation in election in 2024 and 40% by 2028. This contributed to raising women's representation in parliament to 25.4% for the first time, aligning with regional averages. Mongolia has strengthened its legal framework to address GBV with increased funding and established a coordinated response mechanism and established eGBV system. The government is implementing community-based program and integrating gender-sensitive approaches into disaster management to protect vulnerable population during crisis. Under the Digital Nations, Mongolia launched e-Mongolia platform, enhancing access to government services under online platform. Initiatives like Coding Writing Girls program have empowered women and girls in STEAM fields, contributing to narrowing the digital divide. Regarding social protection policies, expanded programs to support women economic empowerment, including maternity leave benefits, access to credit for female entrepreneurs, and childcare service, such as gender-responsive work policy adopted by tripartite body. the 10-year cross-sectoral strategic plan for promoting gender equality in Mongolia for 2022 until 2031 ensures a systematic, multi-level approach to achieving equality and combating gender-based violence, and was approved and started its implementation as a key guiding policy
Can you
document.
wrap up your statement, please?
Okay. Mongolia stands ready to collaborate with the regional and global partners to achieving shared vision of a more just, equitable world. I thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished delegate of Mongolia. Now, may I invite the distinguished delegate of Uzbekistan to take the floor, followed by Bhutan.
Уважаемый председатель, уважаемые дамы и господа, от имени делегации Узбекистана позвольте выразить благодарность за организацию этой важной дискуссии. Правительство Узбекистана предприняло значительные шаги для защиты прав женщин, демонстрируя сильную приверженность гендерному равенству и искоренению насилия в отношении женщин и девочек. Эти цели четко определены в стратегии достижения гендерного равенства, а также в национальном плане действий по реализации рекомендаций Комитета СИДО. Узбекистан активно претворяет в жизнь политику нулевой терпимости в отношении гендерного насилия и принял закон о защите женщин от притеснения и насилия, который впервые на законодательном уровне определил защитные меры для жертв гендерного насилия, включая возможность получения охранных ордеров. В 2023 году Узбекистан, первым среди стран Центральной Азии, принял самое передовое законодательство о борьбе с гендерным насилием и криминализовал все формы домашнего насилия, включая физическое, психологическое и экономическое. Этот закон установил уголовную ответственность за преследование и сексуальное насилие в отношении женщин и девочек. Для обеспечения доступа женщин к механизмам защиты Узбекистан создал горячие линии и цифровые платформы для анонимной регистрации случаев насилия. Правительство создало специальную структуру по оказанию помощи жертвам насилия, внедрило систему оказания комплекса правовых социальных услуг жертвам притеснения и насилия по принципу «семья, махалля», район и регион. Эти услуги адаптированы для нужд женщин и девочек, включая сельских женщин. Узбекистан стремится устранить коренные причины насилия посредством общественных и информационных кампаний, а также образовательных программ не только для женщин и девочек, но и для мужчин и мальчиков по борьбе со стереотипами, которые оправдывают насилие. Начиная с прошлого года в системе высшего образования были внедрены учебные и специальные курсы «Права человека», «Права женщин» и «Права ребенка». Узбекистан также внедряет цифровые инструменты для мониторинга случаев интернет-насилия и совершенствования политики, и реализует образовательные кампании по повышению цифровой грамотности. В этом контексте мы активно сотрудничаем с международными и региональными партнерами, разделяя лучшие практики и укрепляя совместные усилия в рамках повестки 2030. Узбекистан остается приверженным усилиям по созданию общества, свободного от гендерно обусловленного насилия, и стремится стать лидером в Центральноазиатском регионе. Мы готовы делиться нашим опытом и учиться у вас для достижения общей цели – это создание безопасного и справедливого общества для всех. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you. Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Uzbekistan, thank you so much for your statement. So, may I invite now the distinguished delegate of Bhutan to take the floor, followed by Philippines.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as underlined by the Beijing Declaration, violence against women and girls is both a human rights violence and a major obstacle to gender equality. Bhutan has demonstrated its commitment to address violence against women and children through policy initiatives, programs, and multi-sectoral collaboration. To name a few, standard operating procedure for gender-based violence, GBV prevention and response has been developed to strengthen institutional mechanisms and streamline multi-sectoral coordination in addressing GBV. A GBV case management guideline was established and its training covered 162 individuals, including protection officers, counselors, and CSO volunteers who now serve as case managers across districts. A guideline for managing survivors of sexual and intimate partner violence in primary healthcare centers was introduced in 2020, with forensic focal persons trained to strengthen the health sector's response to GBV. The National Commission for Women and Children conducted trainings using the RESPECT implementation package, a framework with 7 strategies to guide GBV prevention and response, involving diverse stakeholders to ensure multiple perspectives. During the COVID-19 pandemic, a contingency plan for GVB and child protection was developed, along with the NCWC mobile app for remote case management. A crisis helpline with the first response team and emergency shelters in all districts was set up on the command of Her Majesty the Queen, providing immediate safety, counseling, and legal aid to GVB survivors during the 2nd and 3rd national lockdowns. The Royal Bhutan Police has integrated women and child-friendly procedures into their training curriculum and trained 1,639 personnel since 2021. Women and children desks or units have been established in all major police stations. Likewise, the Desung program has integrated GBV prevention and response into their curriculum, as many Desups serve as frontline workers. Public awareness is a key priority. In 2019, a communication for development strategy was developed to raise awareness on harmful practices, raising children's vulnerabilities, followed by a nationwide campaign on ending violence against children that reached 220,000 women and girls. Public awareness programs on GVB, reporting procedures, and services were conducted in all districts. The International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and the 16 Days of Activism is observed annually, with participation from Her Majesty the Queen Mother, Gyalum Sangye Chodron Wangchuk, who is the UN Population Fund Goodwill Ambassador, and other dignitaries. All these reflect Bhutan's deep commitment to end violence against women and children, and we reaffirm our continued commitment to work towards this endeavor. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Bhutan. Now may I invite the distinguished delegate of Philippines to please take the floor, followed by the United Kingdom.
Honorable Ministers, esteemed partners, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Philippine government, good afternoon. The Philippines works diligently to address violence against women and girls, and our fight has confirmed what we already know, that the impact of violence is further, wider, and graver. It is not slowed by the expanse of time, advancements in technology, global health crises, climate change, environmental disasters, or societal shifts. Instead, it adapts and even worsens, like a monster evolving to find ways to inflict harm. It is thus imperative that our actions be faster, more far-reaching, enduring, and flexible than the monster we are combating. There is no other way. Allow me to share with you the approaches that the Philippines has utilized in this arduous fight thus far. First is to recruit the legislature as a passionate ally. With this strategy, we have enacted several robust laws requiring a higher, more consistent standard of response and harsher level of punishments. We have passed landmark laws penalizing sexual harassment in public spaces, expanding anti-trafficking laws, raising the age of sexual consent, and banning child marriage, among others. Second approach is to make government efforts accessible and visible. Social, digital, and traditional mass media campaigns are being run to bridge the gap between the government and its people. Partnerships across various sectors of society and different fields of industry are being forged. We have improved police presence with women's desks currently in 84% of our 42,046 villages, and increased women's participation in law enforcement and career executive government service. Our third approach is that the judiciary must pay attention. The judiciary is uniquely positioned in our fight against violence against women and girls. Judicial decisions highlight severe repercussions and societal impact of violence against women and girls. By interpreting laws and ensuring their fair application, our courts promote access to justice, safeguard the public, and foster a safer society. The Philippine judiciary has been active in this regard, passing landmark decisions to uphold the rights of women and girls, and collaborating with the executive branch to make justice more accessible and responsive to the unique needs of 58 million Filipinas across our archipelagic nation. The fourth approach is to support a gender-equal economy through macroeconomic and fiscal strategies. The Philippines has consistently allocated a portion of the annual budget appropriations of all government units and agencies to fund measures on gender and development. We have likewise enlisted two of our independent constitutional bodies to ensure the judicious use of GAD budget. Moreover, we have enhanced women's access to resources, promote gender equality, and support victim survivors of violence by strengthening referral mechanisms, social protection programs, including cash transfers for mothers, employment schemes for women, and pensions for older women. The fifth and the last approach, we must cultivate a cultural shift.
Please wrap up your statement, please.
By dismantling deep-seated cultural norms that minimize or accept gender biases or violence, we can promote zero tolerance for abuse. Kap kun kap. Maraming salamat.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished delegate of Philippines, for your statement. So may I invite now the distinguished delegate of the United Kingdom to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Distinguished delegates, supporting the leadership and expertise of women's rights organisations is a key priority for the UK government. We know that women's rights organisations are central to achieving sustainable, effective and survivor-centred prevention and response to violence against women and girls. The UK's flagship What Works to Prevent Violence is the first global programme to systematically scale up proven approaches to support innovation and evidence. This initiative has pioneered approaches around the world that have halved rates of violence against women and girls through addressing root causes. Over half of our rigorously evaluated pilots showed significant reductions in violence in less than 3 years. Through this programme, we are also highlighting the importance of gender-based violence prevention in climate action through its latest research. The UK government launched a new report on gender-based violence and climate change, co-produced by the UK and Australia at COP29 last Friday. The report and policy brief outlines the crucial importance of addressing gender-based violence through climate action and how to do this effectively. I will end by saying the What Works to Prevent Violence programme is currently open and accepting grant applications from women's rights organisations working on preventing gender-based violence, and would like to again recognise the leadership of these organisations in driving forward action at the grassroots. Thanks.
Thank you so much, distinguished delegates from the United Kingdom, for keeping your time. Now, I would like to ask the plenary session, are there any other governments which want to make a statement? Iran. US. Oh. Kazakhstan, Iran, yes.
Singapore.
Malaysia.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Japan.
It's okay. You can start. It's okay. So we saw several countries raising their flag. So we will start with Iran. So I would like to invite the distinguished delegate of Iran to take the floor now, followed by Kazakhstan. Please. Please manage well your time in order to allow the other speakers to have time to speak too. Please, 3 minutes.
In the name of God, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to share with you today the action we have made in enhancing the sense of security for women and girls in our cities. Urban security has two key dimensions, objective and subjective. The objective aspect related to the physical infrastructure, laws, regulation, and law enforcement mechanism that ensure safety and prevent crime. But the subjective dimension, what we call the sense of security, goes deeper. Is shaped by personal experiences, the social environments, media influence, and other factors. When people feel secure, they are more inclined to participate in public life and engage in social activities. This, in turn, stimulates the city's economic, social, and cultural vitality. It improves the quality of life for families, make the city more family-friendly, and ultimately ensure that both women and men have equal opportunity to participate in city life. With this understanding, we initiate the Urban Security Enhancement Program for Women, which has launched in Tehran. Gives that feeling of insecurity are subjective and not easily quantifiable. We adopted qualitative methods such as focus group and educational workshop involving women directly from various neighborhoods across Tehran. This discussion allowed us to identify the type of insecurity women experiences and the specific situation that heightened this concern. In the second phase, we developed 11 key indicators to measure and address women's sense of security in the city, such as human scale spaces, visibility, lighting, sidewalk quality, crowd density, diversity of land use, and etc. Based on this finding, practical guidelines were issued to the 22 districts of Tehran to address these factors. The project was designed as a participatory and ongoing initiative. In the third phase, a direct hotline 137 was established to enable continuous communication between Tehran's residents and city officials. Women could report a specific location where they felt unsafe. This data was gathered, and the municipality took action by implementing targets urban intervention, like sealing of a fencing, abandoned building, and vacant lots, clearing areas that had become gathering spots for drug users.
Please wrap up your statement, please.
And
the time is running out.
According to the And finally, according to the latest data, since the program began in early 2021 until mid-2022, a total of 35,312 locations were identified across Tehran where the women reported feeling unsafe, and of these, 21,202 have been addressed and improved, and make Tehran safer and make pleasure environment for women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished delegates of Iran. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate of Kazakhstan. I would like to invite you to take the floor, followed by the United States of America.
Thank you. Kazakhstan joined the CEDAW in 1998. However, the National Commission on Women's Affairs, being only a consultative body, has limited power to implement the main recommendations. Every year, about 100 protective orders are issued for victims of violence. Around 400 women die every year as a result of domestic and sexual violence. Civil society has been pivotal in addressing violence against women. The 2009 law on the prevention of domestic violence helped to improve data collection and created 46 crisis centers. However, this number is still not enough, especially in rural areas. The tragic death of Saltanat Nukenova, who was killed by her husband, a former Minister of Economy, became a turning point. This led to the criminalization of domestic violence, but there is still a need to improve the work of law enforcement agencies. Opposition from ultra-right groups has complicated our efforts by putting disinformation and threatening people. Misogyny and sexism remain major issues, often promoted by parliament members under the guise of traditional values. Feminists have called for sexism to be classified as hate speech, but this has faced resistance, as have feminist marches only was allowed in 2021. Last December, President Tokayev approved a human rights action plan. This plan includes training programs on gender equality. Civil society is ready to work with the authorities and their partners to make these initiatives happen and create a more fair society for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Kazakhstan. Now, may I invite the distinguished delegate from United States of America to take the floor, followed by Singapore.
Thank you, Chair. The United States is committed to preventing and responding to all forms of gender-based violence, both at home and abroad. Globally, our work is guided by the U.S. strategy to prevent and respond to GBV globally. Domestically, we are proud to have, for the first time, a U.S. national plan to end GBV. Within the context of Southeast Asia, the United States is deepening engagement with ASEAN on gender equality. The inaugural ASEAN-U.S. Ministerial Dialogue on Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment in September 2022 identified gender-based violence as a joint priority for ASEAN and the United States. We are actively following up on this determination through cooperation with the ASEAN Committee on Women and the ASEAN Committee on the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Women and Children. The United States remains committed to preventing and responding to gender-based violence here in the Asia-Pacific region and globally. In addition, advancing care infrastructure and valuing domestic work is one of the pillars of the U.S. strategy on global women's economic security. The United States is proud to invest in IFC's Care to Equal program, which is strengthening private sector care services, as well as in the World Bank's Invest in Child Care initiative, which will expand access to quality childcare and early learning programs globally. The United States is also working to close the gender digital divide through the Women in Digital Economy Fund, a public-private partnership that includes a $50 million contribution from USAID. This initiative brings together governments, private sector companies, foundations, civil society, and multinational organizations to accelerate progress towards closing the gender digital divide. Initiative partners have already pledged contributions totaling over $515 million to further align efforts that will bridge the digital gender divide. The United States is committed to advancing gender equality and the full participation of all women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, distinguished delegates of United States of America, for your statement. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate from Singapore. I would like to invite to take the floor, followed by Indonesia. Singapore, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Distinguished Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this topic. Singapore is one of the safest countries in the world. In 2022, we have been ranked first in Gallup's Global Law and Order report. The Singapore government has taken decisive measures to combat violence and harm against women through legislation, enforcement, and policies. These measures strengthen protection for victims of sexual and hurt offences in various settings and have evolved to meet the changing context and nature of harms such as emerging trends in the online sphere. Through legislation and enforcement, the Singapore government continues to take seriously any incident of sexual violence against women. For example, in February this year, as part of the Criminal Procedure Bill, a new sentencing option was introduced, the sentence for enhanced public protection, which will allow for a serious offender, such as serious sex or violent offenders, to be detained until he or she no longer poses a significant threat to public safety. On addressing family violence, the Women's Charter was amended in 2023 to strengthen protection for victim survivors and enhance rehabilitation and accountability of perpetrators of family violence. We also launched the 24-hour Domestic Violence Emergency Response Team, where social work professionals from the Ministry of Social and Family Development will respond jointly with the police for domestic violence cases with immediate safety risks. In this digital era, online harms have emerged as a new form of threat to women's safety. Most recently, the Singapore government has also introduced a suite of legislative measures to deal with harmful online content and behavior, including those targeted at women and girls. For example, the Online Criminal Harms Act came into effect in February this year. It introduced levers to enable the authorities to deal more effectively with online criminal activities, such as the non-consensual dissemination of intimate images and the distribution of child sexual abuse material. The Act empowers law enforcement agencies to issue directions to online service providers, other entities, or individuals to restrict the exposure of users in Singapore to online criminal content and activity. To conclude, Singapore does not tolerate any form of violence against women. Protecting women from violence requires a strong partnership among government agencies and community partners, as no one should suffer abuse in silence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, distinguished delegates of Singapore, for your statement. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate of Indonesia, whom I now invite to take the floor, followed by Japan.
Terima kasih, Madam Chair. I would like to commend all the panelists today for their presentation. Indonesia reaffirms its commitment in advancing gender equality and women's empowerment as one of the cornerstones in our national development. The 8 visions, or Astacita, of the newly formed Merah Putih Cabinet has prioritized gender equality by fostering humanistic, gender-responsive policies that emphasize women's empowerment and child protection. With regards to the issues that we discussed today, I would like to share some highlights. First, gender equality and women empowerment is one of the targets of Indonesia's long-term National Development Plan 2025-2045, integrated in all settings, including climate change and care economy. The plan envisioned a future where gender equality and women empowerment is fully realized by ensuring and strengthening gender mainstreaming governance through whole-of-government approach. Second, promoting equal employment opportunities through extensive care economy policies for women is also the key, through law on maternal and child welfare and the development of care economy roadmap 2025-2045. Within its 7 strategic issues, the roadmap aims, among others, to ensure that care works and social protection for care workers, women, men, family, as well as communities towards the realization of Golden Indonesia 2045 vision. Third, further efforts to advance gender equality include improving access to education and health, promoting leadership and decision-making, increasing the role of women in economy and workforce, protecting women from violence, and strengthening the implementation of gender mainstreaming policies within the government. Nevertheless, we are fully aware that social and cultural norms remain significant barriers that persistently hinder the participation of women in all settings. Therefore, Indonesia is now intensifying efforts to challenge stereotypes through targeted advocacy and communication strategy aiming at shifting the norms toward greater justice for men and women. Collaboration is the key, Madam Chair. Continued engagement within government, CSOs, private sectors, community, religious leaders, and all is pertinent, especially with men and boys, so to ensure that the strong ownership of all stakeholders are achieved. To close, if it is possible, we have also some point to ponders and questions to panels as well as the floor. What multi-sectoral approaches that can be implemented to accelerate gender equality that address systematic divides and facilitate key transition in education, employment, and leadership. Terima kasih. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you so much, distinguished delegate of Indonesia. May I now invite the distinguished delegate of Japan to take the floor, followed by India.
Thank you for this opportunity to comment. Japan is facing a demographic transition, and it is closely linked with other forms of transitions, including the care economy. Recently, the population shift of young women from rural to urban areas has been accelerating, and that accelerates the population decrease in rural and local areas. The reasons for leaving are thought to be gender biases and stereotypes that are deeply embedded in their hometowns. We would like to share an innovative initiative undertaken by the local government of Toyooka City in Hyogo Prefecture, which is a town in rural setting with a population of about 72,000. In 2018, the local government launched an initiative to eliminate gender gaps under the strong leadership of the then mayor. First, they established a partnership with the Toyooka Chamber of Commerce and Industry and jointly launched the Work Innovation Promotion Council to transform the culture of local businesses. The council provides a platform for business leaders to learn about how job segregation and gender biases discourage women, and helps the employers to identify transformative solutions to address structural barriers by changing, for example, performance evaluation and working arrangements. Many companies have already seen swift, tangible results, such as a substantial increase in the percentage of women in managerial and technical positions, as well as the percentage of men taking paternity leave, and so on. Next, the government started a whole-of-society initiative to transform perceptions of gender roles and norms in the family, community, and school education. They convened a gender-balanced, multi-generational committee involving stakeholders from businesses, small districts, and education to develop a roadmap for eliminating gender gaps. And the roadmap was formulated based on thorough gender analysis of various sex disaggregated data. Unique initiatives include the production of manga as a tool to raise awareness and candidly talk about gender gaps in Toyooka, and of a communication sheet for couples to discuss the equal sharing of unpaid care work. In a smaller district, a senior male leader initiated a process to bring together women and men of multiple generations to share experiences of how gender norms have restricted their choices in life and discuss actions to overcome them. The district appointed a woman to a leadership position for the first time, and other districts are following the same path. This is also a good example of how men leaders can play a role in engaging diverse stakeholders and promoting gender equality as a way of coping with multiple transitions. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Japan, for your statement. I now invite the distinguished delegate of India to take the floor, followed by Malaysia.
Thank you, Chair. India is firmly committed to ending all forms of discrimination and all forms of violence against women and girls, both online and offline. We have an expansive legal and policy framework, both for prevention and timely redressal, to empower all women and girls to live with dignity, free from violence and discrimination. Remarkable among them are stringent laws on sexual violence, such as rape and trafficking, and survivor-centric central legislations on domestic violence and torch-bearing legal framework for addressing sexual harassment of women at workplace. 48 schemes and projects for prevention of crime, capacity building of duty bearers and law enforcement agencies, increasing forensic, including cyber forensic capabilities, fast-tracking justice delivery systems worth $1.2 billion, are implemented through a non-lapsable fund called Nirbhaya Fund. A robust network of nearly 800 one-stop centers covering entire geographical area of the country deliver integrated support and assistance to women affected by violence and in distress. Under one roof, like medical, legal, temporary shelter, police assistance, psychological counseling. Steps have also been taken towards National Women's Helpline 181, a short code, and integrated with emergency response support system with telephonic short code of 112, and providing compensation to the victims and survivors. In an increasingly digitizing world, we are committed to bringing the gender digital divide, promoting digital literacy for over 35 million rural women, which continue to be one of the core priorities of India in the forthcoming 5 years. Today, India is considered as the software powerhouse of the world, with ever-increasing focus on new and emerging technologies like AI, and the Indian women are a major contributor to shaping this sector. Recognizing the disproportionate impact of climate change on women resulting in an increase in their care responsibilities, India has prioritized reducing drudgery and women's time poverty by increasing in care infrastructure and various services to support women. India reaffirms its cooperation to driving collective action towards accelerating gender equality through transformative actions, including towards identifying promising regional and global approaches in reducing gender-based violence, climate change, and new and emerging technologies through learning and sharing of best practices. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished delegate of India, for keeping your time. So, the next speaker on my list is a distinguished delegate of Malaysia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Violence against women and girls remains a significant challenge to all of us, not inclusive to Asia Pacific, but globally. In addressing violence against women and girls, Malaysia has enacted comprehensive laws and regulations focusing on reparation, rehabilitation, and victim compensation, such as the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act 2022 and the Domestic Violence Act 1994, as well as criminalized stalking in 2023. The government of Malaysia recognizes sexual harassment as a form of gender-based violence. Accordingly, the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act aims to strengthen our justice system by introducing a dedicated tribunal to address complaints, employing a balance of probabilities standard of proof. The Act is different from the other existing legislation as it consists both the punitive and education components with its own impact towards the society. As of 8 March 2024, aligned with International Women's Day, the Act is fully enforced, including the operationalization of the Tribunal for Anti-Sexual Harassment. To address domestic violence, Malaysia provides resources such as shelter homes along with 24-hour one-stop crisis center or SCC services at government hospitals. Additionally, the guidelines for addressing domestic violence cases published in 2023 offers essential guidance for officers handling domestic violence cases. Moving forward, Malaysia remains committed to enhancing protection for women and girls. We will continue to strengthen our legal frameworks, improve access to support services, and promote public awareness to foster a society free from violence and harassment. By working collaboratively, both nationally and internationally, we can create a safer and equitable future for all, particularly women and girls. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, distinguished delegate of Malaysia. We have now come to the end of statement by government. We will move to statement by intergovernmental organizations, UN agencies, and CSOs. New directive I received. The time limit is now 2 minutes. I'm so sorry. This is the new directive in order to accommodate all speakers. So 2 minutes per statement. So May I start with the first speaker is from Asian Development Bank. So please, you have the floor, followed by IOM.
Thank you, Chair. It's an honour to address this esteemed gathering on the critical issue of accelerating gender equality through transformative actions. In the past 2 days, we have reflected on notable strides over the past 3 decades, yet highlighted the significant gaps and inequalities that persist in almost all sectors of society, calling for a much greater sense of urgency. As we look to the future, it is crucial to make economies work for women and prepare them for jobs of the future, which are largely green and digital. We must maximize job creation in high-growth sectors like renewable energy, where women currently make up only 32% of the workforce. We need to place women at the center of climate change decision-making to access climate financing and implement women-led solutions. We must also scale up investment in gender equality alongside bold policy reforms, and tackling deep-rooted social norms remains crucial. The Asian Development Bank is raising the bar with gender transformative actions. In addition to ensuring that all our investments maximize gender equality designs, we have been implementing a dedicated grant financing window through our Asian Development Fund for projects that directly address SDG 5 areas. The CARE project mentioned this morning by the delegate from Tonga is an example. Since 2021, 27 projects have been approved for a total of US $158 million, while the next round of grants from 2025 to 2028 is estimated to reach $190 million. In the Solomon Islands, for example, a $15 million grant for secondary education is tackling sensitive topics such as adolescent pregnancy to ensure that teenage mothers can return to school. And a recently approved approximate $10 million grant is our first standalone project to focus on addressing gender-based violence in Cambodia. As ADB ramps up efforts, we are particularly committed to expand women's access to quality jobs, support women's entrepreneurship, promote gender-responsive policy reforms such as gender-responsive budgeting and taxation, enhance women's leadership, expedite a response to the gender and climate nexus, invest in the care economy, and boost private sector investment for gender equality. Realizing the vision of the Beijing Declaration and Platform Action requires collective effort to step up gender transformative actions. Business as usual will not suffice, and ADB reaffirms our commitment to work together to achieve this ambition. Thank you.
Statement. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, distinguished representative of the ADB. Now may I invite the distinguished representative from IOM to take the floor, followed by UNFPA.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Excellency, distinguished delegates, esteemed panelists, gender influences all aspects of human mobility. Demographic shifts in Asia-Pacific increase demand for care workers. Migrant women are supporting their home economies through remittances, but many of them struggle to access financial services. As climate change intensifies, displacement of women and girls will likely increase, exacerbating pre-existing inequalities. And yet, historically, international migration governance has been largely gender-blind. Data and statistics on migration often fail to capture the gender dimensions of migration due to little sex-disaggregated data. We need more protection-focused actions to ensure legal identity, regular migration channels, and gender-responsive frameworks for survivors of exploitation, trafficking, and violence against women and girls, regardless of their migration status. IOM is committed to pursuing gender equality to ensure safe, orderly, regular, and inclusive migration pathways and solutions. Success in this endeavor requires robust partnership. Recently, we supported the 17th ASEAN Forum on Migration Labor, which focused on care work and labor migration in ASEAN. Also this year, IOM signed a new strategic collaboration agreement with UN Women and with UNICEF for our joined-up approach. Public-private partnerships, too, are crucial in promoting ethical recruitment and human rights, including for migrant women domestic workers. Distinguished delegates, let us commit ourselves to accelerating investments in innovative, gender-responsive migration strategies in empowering women and girls so that they can participate in decision-making and implementation. Doing so is critical for building stronger, more resilient communities, ensuring no women, no girl, or no migrant is left behind. I thank you, Honorable
Thank
Chair.
you. Thank you, distinguished representative from IOM. Now, may I invite the next speaker, distinguished representative from UNFPA, followed by FAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. UNFPA is availing its slot to speak on Roundtable 4, and apologies, you have to listen to me twice in this newly combined session. So to fully realise the promise of Beijing+30, it's essential to view these transitions through a gender lens, understanding both their impacts on women and girls and how they can be leveraged to advance gender equality and sustainable development. Climate change exacerbates vulnerabilities and deepens gender inequalities in Asia-Pacific. It's essential to integrate gender-responsive strategies into disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation, ensuring that women and girls are not only protected, but empowered to lead and contribute to resilience building. Early warning systems and capacity building for women and girls strengthen community resilience and address their unique needs in disaster contexts. Scaling up these efforts is crucial, requiring more investments in gender-responsive DRR and ensuring women's active participation in shaping climate and disaster response strategies. On population aging, 1 in 7 people in Asia-Pacific are aged 60 or older, and the number is projected to double by 2050. A rights-based life cycle approach that invests in every individual at every stage, from infancy to old age, will ensure resilience, well-being and equal opportunities. This approach empowers women and girls, including older women, and promotes their integration into the workforce. The silver economy presents a tremendous opportunity for the region, with potential to boost GDP ranging from 0.5% in Malaysia to almost 3% in Japan. Older adults are not a burden, they bring wisdom, experience and innovation. We must invest in a robust care economy, ensure care responsibilities are met and provide the infrastructure and support for women and girls to thrive. Finally, turning to technology-facilitated gender-based violence, research shows that 85% of women and girls have witnessed digital violence. UNFPA works with governments to develop policies and legislation to prevent and respond to digital violence and hold perpetrators accountable. In parallel, we encourage tech companies to prioritise ethical guidelines and safety by design principles to create safer digital spaces. In conclusion, when a girl or woman, young or old, is free from violence, she becomes a powerful force for positive change. Whether combating climate change or navigating an ageing society, empowered women and girls are essential to building that sustainable, inclusive future we want. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished representative from UNFPA. Now, I would like to invite the distinguished representative from FAO to take the floor.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, on behalf of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, I would like to express my appreciation to the organizers of this important process. Empowering women in agri-food systems is crucial, not only to eliminate hunger and poverty, but to build resilient and sustainable communities. FAO's recent findings highlight that gender transformative approaches, which address deep-seated discriminatory norms, are cost-effective interventions in driving progress. While the concept of gender transformative change is not new, its application and strategies have evolved to address our shifting global, regional, and local challenges. FAO has increasingly collaborated extensively with stakeholders to address the root causes of gender inequality in agri-food systems through interventions that seek to improve women's access to resources and services, as well as to engage communities to shift power dynamics, enabling more inclusive decision-making and equal opportunities in agri-food systems. These efforts allow women and men to come together to reflect, discuss, and build agri-food systems that serve everyone. We are witnessing positive impacts across multiple dimensions. For example, in Papua New Guinea, we are working closely with community members, producers, government officials, and development partners to promote sustainable and inclusive rural development by integrating gender transformative approaches within climate-resilient value chains. This experience also informs policy dialogues and supports the institutionalization of these approaches. There is more to be done. To unlock the full potential of gender transformative approaches, we must continue to document and expand effective strategies to a larger scale, ensuring their impact reaches all the people we serve. Achieving this vision requires unwavering commitment and meaningful collaboration among all stakeholders, as this change extends beyond the mandate of any single institution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for keeping your time. Now we are moving to the civil society and other stakeholder statement. Directive of the time limit is still 2 minutes, please. Please manage your time well. So I would like to invite the first speaker, Musava and Samsara organization, and followed by Korea Women's Association United and Highland Women Human Rights Movement. So please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
I speak on behalf of 300 organizations from the CSO Forum in the Asia Pacific. Women in the region continue to face multiple challenges that lie at the intersections of access to SRHR with violence, climate crisis, care burden, digitization, lack of political will around human rights, increasing authoritarianism, fundamentalism, and conservatism. These are further heightened by gender disparities, statelessness, and gender discriminatory laws which obstruct SRHR, in particular discriminatory family laws, justified often under the freedom of religion and belief. We demand the states to commit to the implementation of the Beijing Declaration through resourcing, inclusive policymaking, and upholding human rights at all times, immediately eliminate all discriminatory and regressive norms, laws, and policies that violate and criminalize citizenship rights, SRHR, bodily autonomy, consent, and legal capacity, and lift all reservations to CEDAW Article 16, amend discriminatory family laws, and comply with all international human rights obligations.
We also demand member states to increase and improve public investment, financing health, including sexual and reproductive health, repeal all punitive laws, develop social protection system, universal health coverage, ensuring women, girls in all their diversity, particularly marginalized communities like sex workers, have safe, timely, and continued access to a comprehensive sexual reproductive health rights information, supplies, and service. Investment on disaggregated data for monitoring and strengthening policies and agenda. We demand decriminalization, destigmatization, demedicalization, and legalization of safe abortion care to be accessible for all. Ensure inclusive, comprehensive sexuality education for all from a right-based and pleasure-centered lens, prioritizing bodily autonomy, consent, and choices. It is time for us to act boldly, concretely, for a transformative, gender-just future. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Distinguished speakers from Musava and Samsara, now may I invite Korea Women's Association United and Highland Women Human Rights Movement to take the floor, followed by NEU Women Alliance for Climate Justice.
Thank you, Chair. We speak on behalf of 300 organizations from the CSO Forum in the Asia-Pacific region. Despite billions invested in cybersecurity, governments have failed to ensure accessible, inclusive, and safe digital space for marginalized sectors, particularly women and girls. 46% of women in the region lack internet access, highlighting unequal access to technological benefits. The rise of digital platforms have increased online violence against women, with 38% experiencing online violence and 85% witnessing. Women in public life, journalists, activists, and those with intersecting identities face higher risk. In East Asia, we have witnessed how GBV can be related with advanced ICT development, and patriarchal structures can cause harm to women and girls online. Moreover, digital sexual violence is occurring on an alarming scale across a variety of online platforms. We demand government to recognize the interconnectedness of online and offline GBV, address digital surveillance, and ensure freedom of speech for women and girls of all their diversities. The rapid digitalization must not perpetuate inequalities.
We demand governments to take action against the industrialization of digital sex crimes and ensure concrete measures to improve the support system for victims of digital sex crimes in conjunction. We demand accountability from governments and big techs, protection of digital rights, data privacy, constituency-based policy making, regulation of tech-facilitated GBV, and an end to online attacks. We resist rapid digitalization and demand for the decolonization of tech infrastructure rooted in our unique lived realities, bridge the gender divide gap and address technology-facilitated GBV, hate speech, disinformation, and misinformation, ensure digital identities are not linked to access to essential social protection. We demand to foster digital literacy and autonomy and treat digital rights as fundamental human rights. We stand in
Please summarize
solidarity
your statement, please.
with women and girls in all their diversity facing GBV and tech-facilitated violence. It's time for us to act boldly, concretely, for a transformative, gender-just future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished speakers. So may I now invite the next speaker is from Niue Women Alliance for Climate Justice, followed by Hiking with Knowledge Mongolia. So you have the floor, the Niue Women Alliance for Climate Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Jamal Talangi from Niue, representing the Niue Women Alliance for Climate Justice, focused on adaptation and sustainable development. I speak on behalf of the 300 organizations from the CSO Forum in the Asia-Pacific region. Our countries continue to face the likelihood of increased global temperatures expecting to surpass the 1.5 degrees Celsius between 2021 and 2040. Women face explicit and implicit social norms and laws that have imposed differentiated powers, roles, and responsibilities on women and men in all aspects of life. CSOs are frontline workers, and we are holding the line. Free 50 Pacific climate warriors and a just transition in renewable energy. A student movement led by Vanuatu, which ended in the United Nations General Assembly resolution on climate justice. But still, we would continue to face the uncertainty of the impacts of climate change every day. We are racing against time with the heightened concerns of how our small island developing states and indigenous ethnic groups across Asia will be able to sustainably adapt to and mitigate the climate change and also address the climate justice issues they face. Member states, we must take concrete measures to ensure that climate mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage strategies and gender transformative and address concerns of direct and structural violence brought by climate emergencies. We must recognize the role of women in all their diversities in climate solutions, community resilience, adaptation strategies, disaster preparedness, and risk reduction. Our women need to understand the complexities of the concepts that we talk about in forums like this in their own way of knowing and being. It is time for us to act boldly, concretely for the transformative gender-just future. Kia munuina, goelahi.
Thank you, distinguished speaker. May I now invite the next speaker is Hiking with Knowledge Mongolia. Please, you have the floor.
On behalf of Central Asia and Mongolia, I would like to bring your attention that 30 years since Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, the challenge to attain gender equality now become more multifaceted by rise of a climate crisis. As the climate change effects become more evident, inequality across gender, caste, age, class, economic status, migration status become more and more wide. And women and girls in their diversities, especially one in most vulnerable and marginalized condition in Asia and the Pacific, become at the front line of unpaid care, emergency responses, and preparedness in all settings. Yet they remain underrepresented in shaping climate policies. We call for gender-responsive climate action and gender-responsive climate financing to address the disproportionate impacts of climate change on women and girls across their life cycles. Integrate gender perspectives into national disaster management programs, climate policies, support women-led and grassroots environmental initiatives, provide resources, skills, sustainable jobs, financing for those affected by climate-induced disaster, migrations, displacement, and other impacts. Ensure that women and girls in their diversities are included in environmental sustainability, green economy, justice initiatives, include reducing carbon emission, renewable energy, transport, regenerative agriculture, natural farming. Ensure that initiatives are accessible to women in their diversities, including the rural women, women with disabilities,
those from marginalized communities, and migrants. To integrate climate justice in prevention and response to sexual and gender-based violence, essentially in the context of climate and conflict crisis, it is imperative to ensure universal and comprehensive access to sexual and reproduction health and rights even in such times. It is time for us to act boldly. I have a short time to speak, and we have a short time to act.
Thank you so much, distinguished speaker. As I see no more speakers, I would like to thank the moderators, panelists, and delegates for their active contribution in time management, which is essential to enable the smooth running of this meeting. Thank you so much. So the meeting has now concluded its deliberation on the agenda item 3. So may I thank again the moderators, panelists for sharing their insight, and all delegates for sharing their views and priorities. Your insights will be summarized and captured in the shared summary. This session was a highly productive session. Now I would like to draw your attention to the draft decision as proposed in the document ESCAP MCBR 2024-2, which reads as follows. The participant in the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference in the Beijing+30 review called upon the Secretariat of the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific and other entities of the United Nations system in the region within their respective mandates to continue to support member and associate member of the Commission in the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the outcome of their reviews in the context of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the national and regional levels. Before I open the floor, I would like to remind all delegations that the draft decision has been edited by the professional editors of the Secretariat and will be edited again before and after adoption. Therefore, I would encourage delegation to leave all grammatical aspects to the Secretariat and focus on the substantive element. Can we take it that the conference agrees to the above decision? Would any delegation wish to intervene specifically on the text proposed? I see.
I see now.
So, apparently, no comment, no proposal.
So we adopted it.
So, can we adopt?
We adopt it tomorrow.
Yes.
We'll include it in the report tomorrow.
Okay, we will link the draft decision with tomorrow's session for the adoption. So if there is no So this is the second one.
Read the second decision.
It's okay. So for the first one, as there is no flag raised intervention, so I would like to move to the second draft decision for your consideration. So the draft decision.
There is someone.
There is someone. Iran. So please, this is for the first draft. Yeah. The first draft. Okay. Please, you have the floor, Iran.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Regarding the first draft, if you kindly put the text on the screen to be visible for other delegates, I really appreciate it.
Please, can the Secretariat reflect the document, yes, the text on the screen, please?
So our proposal comes with a minor addition on the second line. After Beijing+30 review, call upon, deletion of call upon, and request, to insert request.
Is the proposed amendment acceptable to all delegation? Instead of call upon, is to request?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All delegation agree on this amendment on the text? Yes. Yes? Yes. Sorry, I innovate.
Second decision.
So, adoption for tomorrow's session. Thank you so much. So we are moving to the second draft, the draft decision for your consideration. It's the draft decision as proposed in the document ESCAP MCBR 2024-3, which reads as follows, but if the Secretariat can show the text on the screen would be good. The participant in the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review requests the Secretariat on the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific to organize, in collaboration with the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women, UN Women, and all other relevant partners, a regional intergovernmental meeting to review the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the key priorities for accelerated action in Asia and the Pacific in 2029, and to submit the report on the regional meeting to the Commission for consideration at its 86th session. Would any delegation wish to intervene specifically on the text proposed? Yes, please, you have the floor. Russian Federation, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. So our proposal is to add after the phrase and all the other relevant partners, add as appropriate. Comma as appropriate, comma. Yes, thank you.
Any proposed amendment? Any other?
No, anyone else in agreement with everyone, no more amendment.
Yeah. So is the proposed text as amended acceptable to all delegation?
Yes, it seems so.
Acceptable. So thank you. Thank you so much. Probably we can have a round of applause for the deliberation.
It will be reflected in the report.
So the Secretariat will reflect the proposed change to the text for tomorrow's session.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, for constructive cooperation. I now ask the Secretariat to include the text of this draft decision in the draft report to be considered on Thursday meeting. I also request the Secretariat to include this version of the text in the draft report for consideration during the adoption of the report. So, thank you. We will now continue with agenda item 4, other matters. It is my pleasure to report on behalf of the Bureau on the status of credential of representative of members to the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Beijing+30 review in accordance with Rule 12 of the Rule of Procedure of the Commission. The Chair and the Vice Chair of the conference examined the credential of representatives of 45 member states submitted in accordance with Rule 11 of the Rule of Procedure of the Commission and found them to be in order. The Bureau decided to defer any action on the credential pertaining to the representative of Myanmar at the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review, pending a decision by the General Assembly on the representation of Myanmar and in line with General Assembly Resolution 396 of 14 December 1950, acknowledging the report of the Credential Committee of the General Assembly at its 78th session. May I take it that it is the wish of the conference to take note of the report of the Chair and the Vice Chair? So I see no objection. It is so decided. So, are there any other matters that delegations would like the conference to consider? I think you are tired. So, I see no request for the floor. So, distinguished delegates, thank you for such productive deliberation. The Secretariat will prepare a report of this conference for our review by midday tomorrow noon, Thursday, 21st November. The report will be posted on the meeting's website. Kindly note that in line, the report of the meeting will be procedural in nature. The Chair's summary will be drafted and circulated to members and associate members 1 week after the meeting for fact-checking in consultation with the Chair. So the meeting will resume tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. in ESCAP Hall to consider Agenda Item 5, adoption of the report on the conference. So I look forward to your participation tomorrow, and I now invite the Secretary of the meeting to make relevant announcement. So please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, you will see, I hope very soon, on the screen the evaluation survey. We would highly appreciate it if you take a few minutes to fill out the survey for this meeting by scanning the QR code on your smartphone, or otherwise it will be made available for you to scan. And your response will help us assess the success of this meeting and, importantly, help us to serve you better for future meetings. I'm sure we have tried our best, but however, many of you may have areas where you have problems or questions. If you have a problem or question with the survey, please ask the Secretariat staff. This evening, we have 5 side events taking place from 5:15 to 6:30 p.m. Please refer to the ESCAP meeting website on the side events page for the full schedule and the room information. These side events are again on meeting rooms A, G, and H, 11-1, conference room 4 on 11-1, and the theater on the ground floor. Additionally, tomorrow morning, there will be 2 rounds of side events from 9 to 10:15 a.m. and from 10:15 to lunch. During both time slots, there will be 5 events taking place in previously mentioned room. There will be also 2 online side events during the 1 to 2:15 p.m. slot. But please look at the ESCAP side events webpage. I would also encourage all participants to join us in the 2024 Asia Pacific Care Champions special event from 10:30 to 12:20 in CR2. Just a little error in my ear. The second round of side events tomorrow morning will be from 1 to 2:15 p.m. So the special event will be from 10:30 to 12:20 in CR2. This event is special as it will honor and celebrate trailblazers who have made pioneering contributions to building inclusive and sustainable care systems in Asia Pacific. This event is hosted by ESCAP and UN Women with support from the Global Alliance for Care, in collaboration with Oxfam and World Bank. Additional information is available on the ESCAP meeting website. We look forward to seeing you in the side events this evening and tomorrow, as well as the special event. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So now I wish you a good evening and a good rest, but I suppose for ladies delegates, shopping are waiting for you. So now the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.